Praise the Lord. This is the day the Lord hath made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. Pastor Joseph here, December 18th, the year of our Lord Jesus Christ, 2020, with a live exclusive production, The Demise of the Qur'an in 2020. We've got a wonderful program for you lined up, and we have two expert guests. Our first expert guest I want to introduce is someone who has been on our programs in the past, but it's been a while. Brother Don Deal, are you with us?
I am with you, Pastor Joseph. So good to be back again. I thought for a while that my journey might take me in different directions, but when I got the email that asked me to be on today, I was very, very happy to come back. I miss you guys, and I especially miss the Middle Eastern food of the Detroit area.
Well, praise the Lord, and we pray for an end to this Chinese virus and all of that, so we can meet again and not be completely bound to Skype and StreamYard and all of these technologies. But in the meantime, we thank God for it, and we thank God that you can be with us. And you're now Director of Research and Development at Norman Geisler International Ministries. Can you tell our audience what do you do?
Well, Joseph, my duties vary depending on the situation. I research, I write, and I teach. My specific title at this time is I'm the director of the 12 Points Apologetics program for Norm Geisler International Ministries. 12 Points Apologetics is a classical apologetic system where you take someone from the point where they deny that truth can even exist, and you take them through 12 logical steps that leads to the truth of Christianity.
Amen. Praise the Lord. Well, that's wonderful. Well, hopefully soon we're going to be joined by Dr. J. Smith. But before we do, perhaps Brother Don. Oh, there he is, Dr. J. Smith. Welcome, brother.
How are you?
Praise the Lord. So glad. Just in time.
9 o'clock tonight. I've got the wrong hours, so sorry I'm a little late.
You came on at exactly the right time. I was just wanting to introduce you, and now that you're here, I can. I think our viewers are well familiar with Dr. J. Smith. He has been on a lot of our programs, and I think at the cutting edge of research and study in Islam, the Qur'an especially, and the emerging research in the recent years that is well, should we say, deconstructing the traditional view, or at least that which the Muslims put forth of the holy, perfect, inspired Quran that has only have one Arabic version that has been kept and guarded by Allah. Dr. Smith, would you like to say anything else by way of introduction?
No, I think you've done a good job. Thanks so much, Moses.
Well, thank God for you and for both of you. And I've been looking forward to our program tonight. I know many are. So, Dr. Smith, this idea, the demise of the Quran in 2020, some might say this is a rather grandiose claim. Can you kind of give us a synopsis of the overarching argument that can bring forth such a claim before we get into the details?
Yeah, I think to understand that, you need to know what the claims are to begin with, what the claims about the Quran are. And of course, I assume that everybody that's watching knows what Muslims have said about the Quran. The book, this is it right here, this little blue book that seems insignificant and small, yet for every Muslim, this is an internal revelation. This is a uncreated book. So therefore, it has always existed. It never was created. It has never been written. It has no human intervention. The Quran makes that claim itself. You will find this in chapter 85, verse 22 of the Quran. And since the Quran makes that claim, Muslims have no other choice but to repeat it. And that's probably the difficulty right now. But it goes beyond that. It doesn't just make that claim. In chapter 15, so let's just start before that. Chapter 10, verse 15, and in chapter 18, verse 27, it makes the claim, the Quran itself makes the claim that it cannot be changed at all. It is impossible to change the Quran. Now, what Muslims have done today is to take those injunctions that are there in chapter 85, verse 22, in chapter 10, verse 15, and in chapter 18, verse 27, and they have moved that way beyond what I think the original authors of the Quran intended. I think the original author's intention was that it cannot have any human intervention. What Muslims are saying today is that there's not one letter or not one word could be changed. No, it doesn't say that in the verse. But every Muslim cleric that I've been listening to since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, and certainly the ones that you have heard, have made that statement that Dr. Yasir Qadhi has many times. Dr. Yasir Qadhi, the one that is at the center of this whole controversy this year, has often said that there has not been one word, not one letter that has been changed in the last 1400 years since it was revealed down to Muhammad via the angel Gabriel, or Jibril as they know it, between 610 and 632. And then on top of that, there's one more verse, and that's chapter 15, verse 9. In chapter 15, verse 9, it says very clearly that Allah himself will guard it from being changed. So the reason why it cannot be changed is because Allah himself will guard it. With that kind of injunction, can you see the problem for the Muslims today, or for the last 1400 years? It's not that Muslims are making this claim. It's not that they're trying to one-up us as Christians. It's not that they're trying to look at the Bible and say that their Quran is better than our Bible. It's the Quran itself that makes these claims. So put yourself in their shoes and you can see the dilemma for them. Thank God our Bible doesn't make that kind of claim. There is no such thing in the Bible that says that this is a uncreated book, or that this has been eternal, or this book is eternally preserved on some tablets that are in heaven. No Christian would even think to say that, because the Bible doesn't say that. This book is written by men. We know that. And we know of the names of many of the men who wrote the books. We put their names on the books. So that notion that there is something that is eternal, unchanged, and that God protects it. Now that we would agree with, because that's called inspiration. Inspired by God is totally different than protected or guarded by God, so that there is not one word or letter changed. Listen, when men write letters or write books, you would expect that there should be changes as it's been copied from generation to generation to generation. And that's why biblical text, we have biblical textual criticism. Biblical textual criticism is based on the notion that there will be changes. Therefore, you've got to find as many manuscripts as you can, and you compare the thousands of manuscripts we have. Goodness sakes, we have about 5,300 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 Latin Vulgates, 9,000 in other languages. You add that up, that's about 24,000 manuscripts. With that treasure trove of manuscript evidence, we can pretty well do a comparison between all these. Listen, not just those. We have 19,011 different languages. We can compare language with language and language with language. And that's the beauty of the Bible. The Bible, we know pretty much what the original was just because of the enormous amount of source material that we can go to do a comparison. The Quran doesn't have that. The Quran doesn't have that kind of manuscript evidence. I remember for many years now, when I did a debate with Dr. Shabid Ali back in 2014, we were only talking about 6 manuscripts. The Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Ma'il, the Petropolitanus, the Husseini, and the Sana'a manuscript. That's it. Just 6 manuscripts versus 24,000. Can you see the problem for the Quran? But this idea of immutability, this idea of unchangeability, this idea of preservation, that God would preserve his text from any words, from any letters, from being changed, is an indictment against Islam and against the Quran. Because while you can make that claim, and they have been making it, and listen, I've had to deal with this claim for almost 40 years. 40 years, this has always been thrown at me, that, we don't, unlike you Christians, we have the originals. Unlike you Christians, ours has never been corrupted. Unlike you Christians, we only have one text. Unlike you Christians, every text, every Quran, doesn't matter where you are in the world, every Quran is exactly the same, and it all fits and follows this book right here. This is the Quran they're talking about. This is the Quran they're talking about. Here's the problem. What Quran is this? And what are these right here? Look at these right here. Those are Qurans too, aren't they? And they're all in Arabic, are they not? Yes, they are. This is in Arabic. Those are all in Arabic. There's 9 different Qurans that I have right here that you can buy on the internet. These I got here in the United States. These came from Illinois. I just picked them up in July. Every one of these is different. Not one of them is the same. Not one of them is like this one here, which is the canonized text that was chosen in 1924. This is the Hafs text chosen in 1924, written by a man whose name was Hafs, who died in 796. That's 144 years after Muhammad. Hold on a minute. How can you have a book written 144 years after Muhammad himself and yet claim that that is the text that Muhammad knew? Because Muhammad had been long dead for 144 years. Did Hafs ever live? Did Hafs ever know Muhammad? Did he ever listen to Muhammad? Did he ever hear the revelation or recitation of Muhammad? Did he ever know Jibril? Absolutely not. And that's the problem. This book was chosen and it doesn't even come from Arabia. It doesn't come from Mecca or Medina. It comes from Kufa in Iraq. Oh, can you see why we're making and why this has just exploded? Because this was not known, I imagine, by you or anybody else. I mean, Dean, did you know this before?
Based on an email I got from Jay Smith, yes.
Did I talk about this before?
No, not until recently.
We did talk about it, but not to you guys.
Yeah.
We never brought this up on ABN. We never brought this up on Trinity. We actually knew about this way back in 2016. And it all came to the fore because of one lady. Her name is Hatun is only 5'2". A minuscule lady named who is 5'2", whose name is Hatun Tash. Have you heard that name before?
I saw the video.
You're going to hear it. Her name is going to go down in history as the woman that started the demise of the Quran. And the reason why is because she was brought up a Muslim all her life. She is the daughter of an imam. She is one of a Turkish citizen. She grew up in Istanbul. She has always been told that there is only one Quran. She has always been told by her father, who is a well-known imam there in Iraq, that there is no difference between the Quran we have in the hand today and that which was revealed to Muhammad and that which exists in heaven and that which was canonized by Uthman in 652. Which is what we've always heard. Am I correct? That's what we've always been told.
Yeah.
Until she went down to a bookstore in North Africa. She was part of our team. We were up on the ladder. I was training her to get ready for all kinds of other things. And what we were doing back then, we were not confronting the Quran. We were confronting mostly Muhammad. We were confronting everything, but this, because we didn't really know that this was a problem, because we didn't even know that these existed. Because I had been told when my studies, back when I was doing my seminary degree, that these are known as Qira'at, and these Qira'at were all dumped into the Nile in 1924. But anyway, she was there in North Africa, and she was doing some training of some people there. And of course, she needed to get a Quran. She needed to get an Arabic Quran. Now, she doesn't speak Arabic herself. She's Turkish. So she went into the bookstore there in this city. I won't tell you the name of the city. And she asked the guy behind the counter, "Could you please give me a Quran in Arabic?" And the guy said, "Well, which one did you like?" And she said, "What do you mean, which one would I like? There's only one Quran." He says, "Well, we have here Qalun, we have Warsh, and we have Ibn Kathir, and we have Ibn Amir." And he started listing about 6 different Qurans, including the Hafs, the one here. And he says, "Which one of these do you want?" Well, she said, "Give me all of them." And so she brought them back to London and showed them to me, and I just started laughing. I had no idea that these Qurans still existed. I thought that they'd all been destroyed. I thought that they'd all been thrown away. I thought, believing in my idiocy and my naivety, I assumed that the Muslims had taken care of this back in 1924. Here we were in 2013, 90 years later, almost 90 years later, and they still hadn't taken care of these. And I said, "Well, how many more can you find?" Well, I went up on, we went up and we looked to see how many there should be, and we came across this list here. Now, you can get this list. It's on Wikipedia. Anybody, you go up to Wikipedia and just put Qira'at, Qira''. Just write that on Wikipedia, and you will get this list here. And this is the list of all the different Qurans that are considered to be authoritative today. All right? And the first 7 are these 7 right here. These are the major 7. This is Nafi from Medina, Ibn Kathir from Mecca, Abu Amr from Basra, Ibn Amir from Damascus, Asim from Kufa, Hamza from Kufa, Al-Kisai from Kufa. You know, it's 3 from Kufa, 1 from Basra, 1 from Damascus, and 2 from Mecca and Medina. 7 of them. These are the
By the way,
original
Dr.
7.
Smith, I'm sorry. Just so the 7. Do you think in their Wikipedia or whoever is giving them these sources, you think they're taking a cue from the Hadith? There are 7 ways that the Quran is recited.
No.
You think that's where they're getting that 7 from?
No.
Yeah.
Where do they get these from?
Yeah.
Those 7 were chosen by a guy named Ibn Mujahid in 936. That's the 10th century. Ibn Mujahid was a scholar who was living up there in Baghdad. Now, let me cover. I have to say what is today called Baghdad, but Yasser Qadi really hammered me saying, how you don't even know the name of these cities. Listen, if I use the word Ctesiphon, do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know what Ctesiphon means?
Is that Turkey?
No. See,
No, it's in Iraq. It's in Iraq, isn't it?
Ctesiphon is the archaic name for Baghdad.
Baghdad. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I should know.
I'm not going to say, if I sit and say in Ctesiphon is where these guys were, no one's going to understand what I'm saying. If I say Fustat, do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
You should.
Fustat?
Fustat. It's the archaic name for Cairo.
No, I didn't know.
Bingo. See the problem? So I'm going to use modern day names. All right. Any Muslims watching, don't hammer me for this. I'm going to use modern day names because even my co-belligerents here on the panel with me don't even know what I'm talking about. So that's why we have to be careful that we need to make sure that we put it in the context, in the historical context. Now, back then it was called Ctesiphon and Cairo would have been called Fustat. But certainly in the 7th century, in the 8th and 9th century. And the reason why in the 8th and 9th century, all of these names started to appear, like Ibn Amir, that's the first to appear. Ibn Amir is right, actually, he's right here. This is the very first of all of these different Qurans. This is it. This is the very beginning one. This is the first guy. To answer your question, this is the first one. His name is Ibn Amir, but look at his date, 736. When did Muhammad die?
632.
632. So did he know Muhammad?
No.
No, he didn't. Did he even write his Quran in the same century that Muhammad lived? No, he didn't. And he is the very first. Then you have Ibn Kathir, 738, and then you have Warish, 812. You have Ibn Amir, Ibn Kasai, 805, Khalaf, 844, Shobab, 89. I mean, I could go on and on. There are 30 of these, but these 30, the first 7, these ones here are considered to be the best of the best, the creme de la creme. These are known as the readers. That's what qira'at means, the ones who read. These are the original readers. And these are the ones that Muslims will quote you. Now, whenever you hear a Muslim say that there are 7 ahruf or 7 qira'ah that Muhammad received before he died in 632, and whenever you hear that, ask them, okay, what are these 7? What are their names? They will give you these 7 right here. Can you see the problem right there? What's the problem with what I've just said?
They came 100 and plus years after.
100, that's 736 all the way up to 805. That's the 8th and 9th century. None of these guys were living at the time Muhammad. None of these these dialects, as they call them, existed at the time of Muhammad. So can you see that's the lie that Islam has been perpetrating, and it's lie after lie after lie. And that's why we caught them out, because after Hatun went around and started collecting these, she came up with 26 of these by 2016. In 2016, we decided to take them down to Speaker's Corner to show the whole world. And I remember at that time, I was going to go down there, and I didn't really want to take them. I didn't really think they're that important, because being the person that I am, I thought, listen, this is nothing more than dots and vowels. That's all we're talking about. 5 dots, 3 vowels. That's it. You're just talking about where you put those 5 dots and where you put those 3 vowels. And these 5 dots and 3 vowels didn't exist in the 7th century when supposedly the Quran revealed. They didn't exist even in the early 8th century when all the earliest manuscripts were being written, like the Topkapi, Samarkand, Ma'il, and all these others. These don't have dots in them. They don't have dots throughout. There are a few dots here and there that have been added at a later date, but not when they were first written. And so you can understand that if you don't have dots and vowels, you only have 16 letters. You only have 16 letters in the Arabic alphabet, or what you know as the razm, the consonantal text. So you have a problem, because with just one little smiley face like this, that could be 5 different letters. One dot above it would.
Now, just a moment, Dr. Smith, just for clarity. Are you saying then that the differences in some of these are purely in the diacritical marks, or are they in the actual consonants themselves, or both?
These are only to do with diacritical marks.
Okay, because I have heard that there is at least a couple differences in some of these, in some consonants, very small.
That's a whole different argument.
Okay, all right.
Don't even bring that argument. That's this argument here. That's this better. That we're not talking about this tonight.
Okay, got it.
We've not even got into the consonantal argument.
Okay.
And you're right. That's a much more devastating argument. That's going to really destroy the Quran. We're just talking about the Qira'ah.
Okay. Which for those who don't know Arabic or Semitic languages, so basically the letters, as Dr. Smith has pointed out, they are there, but the dots on the top and the bottom, they actually make different letters, or they include the vowels. And so this is the readings, and this is how the differences are that are being asserted in these 7 in particular.
That's all it is.
Yeah, got you.
Now,
okay.
For me, hearing this in 2016, I did the same thing you did. I said, This is not that important.
No, it's very important.
No, but this is what I said, okay?
Right, because as you pointed out, it actually changes the consonants.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah,
but now you're jumping the gun because you're an Arab.
Okay, sorry.
Back up.
Sorry.
Only 15 to 18% of the Muslim world speak Arabic. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go with the 85% who don't speak Arabic, including Hatun Tosh. So when I brought this up, there in 2000, when she brought it up, let me just say when she brought it up and wanted to take him to Speaker's Corner, I kind of looked at her and I said, Hatun, this is just dots and vowels. Nothing very big. Let's stick with the consonants. I just did what you did.
Yeah.
I said, let's just stick with the consonants.
Yeah.
That's much more damaging because that's the rizm. That's the consonantal text. And if you change that, and if you have differences in that, that does change the meaning substantially. She says, Jay, take your academic hat off. Stop talking like an American. You have no idea. Now, Joseph, you're Arabic speaking, right?
I am, but I'm not fluent. But I do speak, read, write Arabic. Yes.
What's your background? What's your hair? Where are you?
Iraqi. I'm half Iraqi and half American.
Okay.
I'm a hybrid.
You're a hybrid. Okay, but you. We'll get to you in a bit because you are actually what this is all about.
Okay.
Okay, it's good. You're gonna
like the Quran, a hybrid.
Nah, it gets even worse than that. A hybrid means just 2. We're going to see what Yasir Qadi said, because talk about hybrid, it goes way beyond hybrid. But so I talked to her and I said, Hatun, who cares? This is not, they're just going to throw it back in our face and say these are nothing more than differences that happened in the 8th, 9th, and 10th century as they were trying to put it together. They were trying to add these dots. Then, if once you add dots, you can have all kinds of combinations and recombinations. You're going to come up with all kinds of differences. And she looked at me and says, you have no idea how stupid you are. She says, you're not thinking this through. Every Muslim has been told there is only one Quran.
Yeah.
Every Muslim has been told there is not one word, not one letter different.
Right.
Every Muslim has been told if there was one word or one letter, that means man has interfered. Man has intervened. It no longer is preserved. It no longer is inimitable. It no longer can be eternal. It no longer can be uncreated. And more than that, you are now saying that Allah cannot control his own word and that Allah is unable to guard it. That's what we need to show the world, she said. That's what we need to show the world. So I was skeptical when I took these down to Speaker's Corner. I was really kind of skeptical. We did it. She needed my voice because I've got a loud voice. And so we got up on the ladder and we held them up. Tuk, 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 tuk. And boy, did we get a reaction. You can go see it. I mean, it's up on Fander Films. Go up and take a look. And I re-put it up there again. Already 50,000 people have watched it. When we put those up there, little did we know, well, we did know that Muhammad Hijab was standing right there watching this. He was right there in the crowd. He's 6'6" or 6'8". I don't know how tall he is, but he's very tall. And so when he's on the ground and I'm on the ladder, his head is next to mine. That's how tall he is. And he was there. You can see him. He's there filming me, but he immediately leaves the crowd, goes back outside the crowd, and then tells all the Muslims to leave us, to come away, to come to him. You can see him say, come here, don't listen to them. Don't watch what they're showing you and don't listen to what they're saying, is what he's saying. He didn't want them to see what we were showing, and he did not want them to hear what we were saying. Now, I didn't pay much attention to him. I didn't really care. I just knew that they were having problems, and I was kind of bemused, to be fair. And so we did it a second time, about a month later. And then in August, we did it a third time. We took it down. By the third time we took it down, we almost didn't leave the corner. They were so angry. And then I realized what Hatun was all about. Then I could see what Hatun was saying. See, the whole Razm argument, Joseph, that you like to talk about, is an academic argument. And to understand the Razm argument, you really need to be in academic tomes, and this is much more an intellectual argument. The Qira'at argument is not intellectual. There's nothing academic about it. It is as it hits the whole fiber of every Muslim. It's at the base of it's at the very foundation of their beliefs, because it suggests that God's holy word is no longer God's, it is man's. Which we don't have a problem with as Christians.
Yeah.
This is not our argument. We never would even, for us, it's laughable that this is even a problem. That's why I had to take my Christian hat off. I had to take my American hat off. I had to take my academic hat off, and I had to start listening to Hatun, 5'2", from Turkey, who was speaking as every Muslim around the world would have spoken. How dare you say that God's holy word is not preserved? How dare you say that there are different letters, there are different words? How many different letters? How many different words? The team in London has now found 93,000 differences.
Amazing.
93,000 differences.
Dr. Smith, that's an excellent place to stop. Before we go to a break, our brother Don Deal has been patient. Before we go to the break, brother Don, as Dr. Smith he's like a fire hose of information. We're just trying to take it in. But brother Don, from your position and in apologetics in general, what's at stake here? I mean, I can get it. I'm in the field. I do know Arabic. I'm hearing what's being said. It's extremely important. But for our average viewer, some of whom which are just laymen, they really don't know the argument. Some do, some don't. What's really at stake with what Dr. Smith and others are uncovering now, what he's talking about?
Well, one of the biggest arguments used against Christianity is the variations in the manuscripts of the New Testament. That is, that they're somehow held that because there's differences in different manuscripts that make no difference in meaning, that could be one word could be misspelled, or perhaps a rephrase. Say, for instance, the Bible may say the 12 went into a village, and another ancient manuscript may say the disciples went into the village. It means no difference to Christians, but there's those differences because we believe the Bible's inspired but not dictated, and it's not an exact copy of an eternal manuscript. The Muslims are saying something different. They say their holy book is superior because there are no manuscript evidences to indicate there's ever been a change and that it's been dictated and preserved. I'll give you a quick quote from Yasser Qadi himself. This is why he says it's been preserved. He said, quote, "We as Muslims believe that God has protected the Quran from any type of alteration or deviation." He goes on to say, "Because the Quran tells us that God has revealed this Quran and God is going to protect it."
That's a good circle.
As I told you earlier, I've taken logic at bachelor and master's level. That's circular reasoning, exactly what petitio principii. They're arguing in a circle. You're assuming what you're attempting to prove. That's a fallacy of logic. And it just gets back to what most Muslims I've come across are. They're fideists. They believe because they believe, not because of evidence or proof. And that evidence or proof to them is just a test of their faith.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brother Don. Well, before we take a break, I'm going to challenge both of you, brothers. I want to hear during this program, is this, if what Dr. Smith is saying is true, which certainly we believe it, but he's going to bring more evidence, does this really demolish the Quran and Islam, or does it merely bring the Quran and Islam onto a level playing field with Christianity? I want to hear that and much more from both of you after this break. And I think we're going to
you'd like to support ABN's ministry, you can give us a call at 248-416-1300, or you can visit our website at www.abnsat.com. ABN appreciates your support and donations.
In Acts chapter 17, Paul and Silas go to the city of Thessalonica, and after they are chased out, they go to a place called Berea. And we read in Acts chapter 17, these, that is the Bereans, were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness and searched the Scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. This is precisely what the Trinity Channel's goal is to help you search these things out to see, in fact, if they are so. These apologetics marathons, the other sorts of things that you see on this channel, these are the lifeblood of good Christian television and good Christian ministry. I invite you to become a partner with the Trinity Channel to help you and other people know if these things are so. Join the Trinity Channel. You'll be very glad you did. Thank you.
Praise the Lord, and welcome back to our program, The Demise of the Qur'an in 2020. I'm your host, Pastor Joseph, along with Dr. Jay Smith, as well as Brother Don Deal. And we are thanking God that we're able to preach the gospel of Christ and also hold it up as a bright and shining light against the Qur'an, which we as Christians do not believe is inspired of God, but admittedly, even by Dr. Smith, we've been at a disadvantage in the debate. We come at a disadvantage, and I guess because, for one reason, as you mentioned in the beginning, Dr. Smith, the church has not been systematically destroying Greek manuscripts throughout, whereas in Islam, it seems that there is either always been a suppression, a destruction, or a denial of any manuscripts in order to protect what you're basically asserting is an illusion of one perfectly preserved, uniform Arabic text. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah.
And
I would go one step further, that in Islam, they've never had any historical, textual, critical edifice to really ask the questions we've asked of our Bible. When you look at these 9 that I have here, how were these chosen? I don't know if you know. Do either you or Don know how these were chosen?
No.
Ibn Mujahid. Now, Ibn Mujahid just chose the first 7. You have after that it comes Al-Shatibi, who then chooses the next 14, 2 for each of the 7, 2 students for each of the 7. Notice the riwayat. They are chosen between, and those he chose those in 1194. That's the 12th century. Then you have another one, Al-Jazari, or Jazari, who in 1429, look at the date, 1429, we're talking about the 15th century, who chooses the next 9, 3 readers and 6 students, riwayats. So that's now 9. By the 15th century, you then have 30. You have 30 of these qira'ah. 30 of them. That's what you have there on this paper right here. There's the whole 30. There's the 3. Here's the 14. There's the 7. Here's the 14. There's the 3. And here's the 6. So 7, 14, 3, 6. You get 30. It takes them 800 years to finally choose these 30. 800 years. Now, what is that? How is that in contrast to the Bible? Well, it was because we're not talking about translations here. These are all Arabic. All right. Every one of these is Arabic. It's as if I were to tell you that we now, by the 9th century AD, we have chosen 30 different Greek Bibles. Every one of them is different. 30 different Greek Bibles and another 30 different Hebrew Old Testaments. Do you see what the problem we would have?
Yeah. Now, Dr. Smith, here's a good point for clarification, again, for the layperson. Brother Don Deal, who will one day be a doctor, we believe, as he's studying for his PhD. He mentioned earlier kind of a generic example of, well, one manuscript of the Greek in the Bible would say the 12. Another manuscript say the disciples. Well, for Christians, we don't have a problem as talking about the same thing. Certainly, we believe that originally there was one, and we hold to that inerrancy. Now, could you help people understand with the Quran and these different readings? I know better, but the Muslims say, Dr. Smith doesn't know. This is just different accents. Now, can you give our people perhaps maybe an example? How much does this change? Does this actually change any meaning of any verses of the Quran? Could you give us an example?
I could give you just between these two right here. The two most popular ones. These are the two most popular. Let's say these two right here. This is the Hafs, the Warsh, and the Hafs. Yeah. There are 5,000 differences just between these two in every case. Now, when we went down in Speaker's Corner and we actually held them up and showed them, we didn't just stop by holding them up. We also went and showed slide after slide after slide. I had 70 that I could have showed. Slide showing the Hafs versus the Warsh, the Hafs versus the Qalun, the Hafs versus Kasai, the Hafs versus Al-Duri. The Hafs always against everybody else. Yeah. I had 70 that we had there at Speaker's Corner, and we were showing them. The Muslims were grabbing them from our hands and trying to rip them up. Fortunately, we had put sellotape on them so they couldn't tear them. They had never heard them. And we were showing that these were absolutely, in every case, they changed the meaning. In some cases, they changed the practices. In some cases, they changed the doctrine. In almost every case. But that's not the problem. No one's asking. So you're asking like a Christian, does this change the doctrine? Right. Is it disciples or is it the 12 that go up in the upper room? That's the one that Don was talking about, where they went up to the upper room. Did the 12 go to the upper room or did the disciples go to the upper room? Who cares as a Christian? Muslims would never admit that. Yeah. You can't even have a letter difference because that means that there's human intervention. So as a Christian, we say, well, does it change the meaning? Listen, no Muslim would have asked that question. Right. That's why Hatun gets it much better than you and I get it. Yeah. I would suggest, listen, who cares? Because I'm as a Christian, I'm looking through Christian eyes. I would want to make sure that they don't change the meaning or the doctrine or the practice. Sure. But any Muslim, and that's why Yusuf Qadi was so shocked when Muhammad Hijab held out his hand there in that interview on June 8th and says, I'm going to give you a blank piece of paper and I want you to tell me which one are you going to write here? On a blank piece of Musaf. He said Musaf. What are you going to write? Is it going to be Qalun? Is it going to be Hafs? Is it going to be Warsh? Is it going to be Kasai? Which one? Is it going to be Al-Duri? And look at Al-Qadi's reaction. Do not ask me this question. Sorry, that's Al-Qadi. You do not ask me this question. We do not talk about this in public. That's right. Yeah. Especially not on camera. And Muhammad Hijab, who had been in the crowd 4 years earlier and was calling all the Muslims to come to him, now was going to the world authority on this very issue. The one person that should know the answer, the one person who got his PhD at Yale University in 1995 on this very issue. And his reaction was, do not ask me this question. And then he went on to say, this is the most difficult question for Muslim scholars in the last 1,000 years. And Muhammad Hijab says, wait a minute. This should be easy.
Yeah.
This should be easy. He finally said to Muhammad Hijab, is this what gave you the crisis of faith back at Yale University in 1995? No. I didn't have a crisis of faith. I had a crisis of knowledge, he said. He said, I am absolutely preserved that the Quran is the word of God. I am absolutely without any shadow of a doubt, there has been no change, not one letter, not one word. I know that Allah can guard his word. He went into what I call the Islamic dance. He started going into this mantra where they just say the same thing that they have always been saying since they were 8 years old. The first time they heard it, they just repeat it. I am absolutely, please don't change my mind. My mind's already made up, is what he was saying.
Well, Dr. Smith, can they?
Started clapping. And I said, this is what we see every Muslim say.
Yeah.
And then he said something was fascinating. He said, when Muhammad Hijab said, well, wait a minute, this should be easy to answer. And he turns to Muhammad Hijab and he says, you in the East, you have holes in your narrative. There are holes in the narrative, in the standard narrative, which is your narrative. But see, I live in the West. I belong over here. I live in Houston. I'm here in the United States. And I had to go to Yale University, and I had to hear this in Yale University. It didn't bother my faith, but it certainly bothered my knowledge, because he said, we in Islam, we have a respect for the Quran. And we only go so far. And then he says, we have a red line. So it was an imaginary red line beyond which we don't go. There are certain questions you just don't ask of the Quran. But at Yale University, there are no red lines. You can ask any question you want. That's the tradition we come from. Yale University is based on biblical textual criticism. In Yale University, or any university here in the United States, where do you think textual criticism, where do you think it was grown? How do you think it got matured? On the Bible. Where do you think source criticism got matured? On the Bible. Where do you think redacted criticism was matured? On the Bible. Every one of what we know as historical criticism has done all their work, basically weren't introduced or invented on the Bible. They were matured on the Bible. And that's why we have Yale universities and Harvard universities and all kinds of other universities. Why do you think so many people come to the United States to go to our universities? Why is it that they are the best in the world? Because we do not have red lines. We do not have questions you can't ask about the Bible. You can ask any question you want of the Bible. Why do you think you have this program? Why do you think you invite people like me on board? So that we can ask everything of the Bible and demand the same thing of the Quran. And the very things that we are asking of the Quran have already been asked by Wellhausen back in 1800s. He asked the same thing of the Old Testament. He said, how can we listen to a man named Moses, who did probably there was probably no writing at the time of 1400 BC? He said very clearly that there are different authors. There couldn't be just one author, because you have the JEDP, the documentary hypothesis, he introduced. Now, someone's just putting up a sign here that the Shia Muslims don't accept the other qira'ats, they accept Hafs only. I'm an Arabic speaker. Be careful. Be careful. It's not a Shia. This is not a Shia-Sunni divide. The Hafs is only accepted since 1924. I'm sure he is an Arab speaker, but you need to make sure that you source what you've just said there. There's no difference between the Shia and the Sunni on this argument. This argument was put together, was created, was canonized in its latest form. But remember, there have been 5 canonizations of the Quran. This is number 5 in 1924. You had the first one in 652 with Uthman. You had the second one with Ibn Mujahid in 936. You had the third one with Al-Shatibi in 1194, and then you had the fourth one with Al-Jaziri in 1529, and then you had the fifth one, which would be the one that was in Cairo by Muhammad ibn Ali Huzani al-Haddad. He was the one that canonized the Hafs text for both Shiites and Sunnis. There's not a difference in Shiite and Sunni as to what Quran they're using today. But why is it that that book is used today now all over the world? It's not just because of one man named Muhammad ibn al-Huzani al-Haddad, who comes from Al-Azhar University there in Cairo. That was only for Cairo that he canonized it, for only one city. In 1936, it was then enlarged for all of Egypt, but it was King Fahd himself there in Saudi Arabia, who in 1985, so we're just talking about 35 years ago, in 1985, who canonized it for the whole world, Shiites and Sunnis together. So it's only 35 years old. And now that means, Joseph, you and I and Don are all older than this Quran. Can you understand the problem there? So, yeah. but beyond that, can you see the difficulty? Getting back to the question that I asked about 10 minutes ago, how did they choose these? Well, let me ask you this, Joseph, Don. How would you choose if you were suddenly a manuscript was plopped into your office, right? If the manuscript was plopped into your office, brand new manuscript that was in Greek, what would you do if it was put on your desk? What's the first thing you would do?
Brother Don.
Language expert, because though I've studied Greek at a basic level in seminary, I'm not an expert. I would not know how to read it properly. Or I would get a thesaurus or a dictionary, language dictionary, and look up the words and attempt a basic understanding, but I would have no idea.
No. Back up, Don. Forget about that. What's the first thing you would do?
Make sure it's authentic. Is that what
you would open it up, would you not?
Oh, of course. Yeah, sure. Open it.
Bingo. Not one of these was opened.
Oh.
I'm going to show you how idiotic this is. The first thing you would do if you were a biblical textual criticist is you would open up and read the script, right?
Right.
Regardless if you speak Greek or not, then you would find then next you would go to the Greek scholar and say, is this the same script as the Sinaiticus or the Alexandrinus or the Vaticanus, a Greek script, right?
Right.
But the first thing you do would at least open it up, correct?
Right.
How do you think all these were chosen?
They're untouched.
Not one of them was chosen by what they said inside. Not one of them had anything to do with any word or any letter or any phrase or any verse. No one even looked inside them to see what they were writing.
If I could, Joseph, there's an issue involved here for Muslims that I think that gets at the heart of this.
Yeah.
In the Quran, in the second surah, first verses, it says, the revelation of the book, that is this Quran, in which there is no doubt, is from the Lord of all that exist. And it goes on to say multiple times, such as, and as for those in whose hearts is a disease, it, that is the signs of Allah, adds uncleanness to their uncleanness, that is the disease of doubt, and they die while they're unbelievers. There are repeated admonitions in the Quran to avoid doubt. Doubt leads to loss of chance of Jannah, of reaching paradise. If you want to end up in hell, the Quran says again and again, avoid all doubt. And what Jay's saying is the text itself is in doubt, and that's what makes this so terrifying and gets that knee-jerk reaction from so many scholars.
I'm not saying that. Forget about the text. If you didn't even open it to read it, there's no one's even looking at the text. So how did they choose these? It had nothing to do with textual criticism. That's what we would do.
Yeah.
That's what you would do, Don. You're talking like a Christian again. So are you and Joseph. You're both talking like Christians. God bless you for doing so. Because for you, it's just logical that if you have a new manuscript or you have a new Bible that's going to be a Bible in 736 or 738 or 770 or 780, whenever these are coming, when Ibn Mujahid decided to choose those first 7, you would have thought he would have opened the books and looked and read them and to see if they were the same as that which had preceded them, right?
Yeah.
He did nothing of the sort. Why didn't he do that? Is the next question.
You open a can of worms. You don't need to.
No, that's not it.
No.
You have to have something to be a standard to be able to compare it to, right?
Oh, I see. Sure. Yeah, you don't know what's wrong unless you know what's right.
Bingo. You have to have a standard to begin with. What standard was there? There was no standard.
That's the can of worms.
That is a huge can of worms.
I see where you're going.
So how did he choose the 7? How did he choose Nafi And how did he choose Ibn Kathir and Ibn Amr, Abu Amr, Ibn Amir, and Asim, and Hamza al-Qasai? Now, see, I didn't know this answer, so don't be upset that you don't know this answer. I didn't know this answer in June either. I had no idea. This all has been researched by a doctor, a student, a professor that's come out of Harvard University named Dr. Shadi Nasser. Are you familiar with that name?
Yes.
Dr. Shadi Nasser, he got his PhD on the Qira'at. He did his PhD at Harvard University. He's now teaching at Cambridge University, and he is the one that is exposing all of this to the whole world. And so we're taking what and all he is doing is going back to the original sources. He's going back to, he's not going to the 7th century, which is interesting because nothing's there in the 7th century. That in and of itself is telling.
Hey, Jay,
10th, 11th, 12th, up until the 15th century.
If you don't mind, Jay, I'll read a extended excerpt from something Shadi Nasser has written about this that covers exactly what you're talking about. This is a quote from him. He says that this idea that the Quran was preserved word for word, he said, you don't find this kind of opinion in the classical sources. The idea that the Quran is protected word for word, it is something that is used for the masses. It is not based on any academic research, Western or Muslim scholar, because they do know that when you say that they do know that we have many because let me say that again, because they do know that when you say that they do know that we have that's when we have many problems and inconsistencies. That is, he says that there's no way to determine what the Quran says because there's different varieties of it, different versions of it, and there's no certainty on any of it, which gets back to Yasser Qadi's problem with Muhammad Hijab. Can you write on this paper the Quran? And the answer is that's a problem for scholars, because for the masses, they believe absolutely that we know exactly what the Quran says, that what they're reading is what Muhammad told his followers, that Allah told Jibril told Muhammad told his followers, and they wrote on bones or pieces of skin. They believe this is word for word, letter for letter, what he said, but there's no way to know.
Well, Brother Don, thank you for bringing that up, and we're about to go to our next break. But before we do, I want to ask Dr. J. Smith, do Muslims have the luxury of simply falling back to an argument more similar to ours and say, well, yes, okay, there's all these Kira, but we have the original was in fact inspired. We have enough to pretty much know what it was, and so this doesn't really affect the authority of the original.
If the earliest one they have is 736, and it doesn't even come from the century Muhammad lived, then how are they going to make that claim?
Well, of course, they could turn on us, and I think we have manuscripts from the 1st century, but that's debated. And so they can say, well, at best, the first biblical manuscript you have is from more than 100 years later.
Exactly. And that's why we have been at the forefront of this debate for almost 200 years. We have admitted and been as transparent as you can be. That's why every Muslim has always said, you guys have a corrupted Bible. You've even admitted it, that there have changes. You talk about Mark chapter 16, verses 9 to 20. You talk about the Gospel of John chapter 7, verse 53 to John chapter 8, verse 11, the woman caught in adultery, that you even mark a line before and after to warn the reader that these verses are not found in the earliest Greek manuscript. And we're the first to admit we don't have the originals. See, we're way ahead of them. And that hasn't bothered anybody's faith. And that's why all of you keep on asking me the question, so does this change the meaning? Who cares if it changed the meaning? Of course it does. Of course it changes the meaning. But why are you even asking this question if this is eternal and cannot even have one word or one letter have mankind intervene with one change or one letter? It no longer is inimitable. It no longer is from heaven. It no longer is from Muhammad. And it certainly is not from Uthman. So how did they choose these? You still haven't answered me. How then did they choose these? If they didn't even open it and look at the words. Let's go to break.
All right. Very good. Well, we're going to go to a break, and we're going to hear how they chose those. And we still have some more questions, and maybe even some viewers have some questions. We'll be right back after this break.
Thank you so much for watching the Trinity Channel and ABN SAT. I'm an Assyrian American Christian activist. My name is Nurain Anwea, and I'm here today to tell you that we truly need your help here at the Trinity Channel. What I see in the Trinity Channel is a very unique characteristic from all the channels that I have interviewed with. The Trinity Channel and ABN SAT has a wonderful characteristic of really truly not only caring for Christianity but humanity all over the world. And we truly together have to keep them working and have to keep them alive to spread the truth of the world issues and the Christian religion and the Islamic religion and all different types of current events that they do on a daily basis. The team here is amazing and they truly need your support. If you can please go to www.trinitychannel.com, or you can also call them 248-416-1300 for more information. And there's also another way that you can actually contribute to this amazing channel by downloading the ABN SAT application in the Apple Store. Thank you so much for watching ABN SAT and the Trinity Channel, and we truly appreciate your support because we truly together need to keep amazing channels like this one alive and active.
Praise the Lord and welcome back to our program. We are live, Mubashir in the flesh. That's right, here with the demise of the Qur'an in 2020, Dr. J. Smith, as well as Brother Don Deal, and you, dear viewers, watching, praying for us, and even supporting, I'm sure. We thank God for you. And we have another half hour in our program. There's a lot that's going to be shared. There's a few questions that I'd like to have answered if we possibly can during this half hour. One is, Brother Don Deal is working with Sharia and Islamic law in his studies. And before we get to the end, I'd like to hear if in your study and research, how, if you've seen any evidence of some of this disparity in what people are quoting, and also how that would affect Sharia, and then, of course, practice in various Muslim countries. But before we get to that, I want to ask Dr. Smith, and then I'm going to let him go back the direction he wants to go. But I want to ask him this question, because you mentioned earlier in the intro, basically, that Muslims have gone really further than the Quran has. They've overstated their case of, not one jot, not one tittle, or not one fatha, or one kasra, or diacritic. So from an apologetic standpoint, when Christian apologists are dealing with Muslims, how valuable is this if, in fact, they've gone past the Quran? Can they not fall back on the Quran, as you mentioned in Surah 85, verse 22? It's inscribed in this tablet, eternal tablet, and so, the low mahfuz in heaven, that is never changed. But what some men might write can be changed. So from an apologetic standpoint, do they have that luxury, or is what you're proving actually makes the Quran self-contradictory and therefore destroys the very foundation?
I think both end. I think this is one reason why this is causing so much problem and why Yasser Qadi had the meltdown that he had 3 weeks ago on November the 26th. His career is really in jeopardy at the moment. Almost many of the Muslims' career is in jeopardy because the claims they're making for the Quran of not even one letter, not one Dama, Kasra, or Fatah has changed is absolutely a stupid claim to make. And nowhere does the Quran make that because the Quran doesn't know about any diacritical marks. When the Quran when it was written in the 8th century, there were no diacritical marks. When the Quran was written, there was no Dama, Kasra, or Fatah. None of this existed. So, of course, it didn't make that claim. This claim has always been made by later Muslims, and it was started in the 11th century by people like Ibn Hazm, who then came across the Bible and realized the Bible and the Quran were two completely different books. So it was from the 11th century that this claim of inimitability, it was from the 11th century that this claim of unchangeability, is from the 11th century that this claim of preservation became the norm, the narrative, and it has then been enhanced and even embellished upon in our day, in the 20th and 21st century, because of the fact that they're engaging with us in dialogue and debate. And the more they engage with us in dialogue and debate, the more that we are finally opening up the Quran. Because listen, they've had the luxury of Westerners not looking at the Quran. We are looking at the Quran for the first time, and we're finding an enormous amount of damaging things in the Quran. Look at all the violence in the Quran. Look what it does with women in chapter 4 and in chapter 3 and in chapter 2. And because of all this damaging material, rather than get into that kind of discussion, all they need to have been doing is, hold on a minute. How can you dare question the internal critique? That's an internal critique of the Quran when this book has always been. This is the only book that has never been touched by human hands. That is a much easier discussion to make because they didn't realize, and to be fair, none of us had done any homework on this. We hadn't done any manuscript evidence. We didn't know what the Qurans we were talking about. We didn't know anything about the Qira'at. This Qira'at and Ahruf argument is only this year. You've never heard this argument before this year, and it's only been in the last 6 months. We've known about it for about 4 years. I've known about it actually for even earlier than that. But as far as it going worldwide, and the fact that we now have YouTube and we're now using the internet to get it all over the world, you can see the damage that is happening. That's why 2020 is a landmark year. This will be the year that the Quran really is. We didn't choose that title by accident for the show. That title is absolutely important because for Muslims, all these claims that they have to make because there's nothing else for them to fall back on. They can't open the Quran and try to defend all these terrible verses from inside. But what they've always had the luxury of doing is saying, yes, but at least we have the original. Yes, but at least we know that this is from heaven. Yes, at least we know that God has protected it. And the Quran itself makes those claims. Now we're saying, no, absolutely not. You cannot say it's from heaven. You cannot say it's from Muhammad. You can't even say it's from Uthman. In fact, about the best you can do is from the 8th century, which means it is as man-made a book as you can get. Knowing it's so man-made, can you then see why it really fits an 8th century Arab environment? And I would say not even Arab environment. It has nothing to do with Arabia. Look at the Arabic in the Quran. The Arabic in the Quran, the fact that it has the Tar Marbuta, the Alif Maksura, the fact that it has the Als, those are not anywhere from the central part of Arabia. Those are Nabatean Aramaic, way up from Petra. This is Jordanian Arabic. The Arabic that's in the Quran should be Sabaic. If the Quran did come from Arabia from the 7th century, it would use Sabaic Arabic, which comes from the Yemen, and Sabaic Arabic already has the dots. The Sabaic Arabic already has the Dhamma, Kasra, and the Fatha, the vowels already in place. Sorry, they weren't Dhamma, Kasra, and Fatha, they were vowels already in place. This question would not even be on the table if they had used the right type of Arabic. Obviously, it proves that the Quran doesn't even come from the Medina or Mecca. It does not come from the Hijaz. There's no such thing called Quraysh. We can't even find any reference to a man named Muhammad from that area. So can you see all of this is starting to implode on Muslims, and it's all happening in the last 6 months. And this is why we need to continue this, because it's just getting easier and easier, because for the first time, we're now seeing Muslims who are trying to defend it, and they're doing a lousy job of it, because Yasser Qadi, what he did finally, at the end of that 25 minutes, when Muhammad Hijab finally says, I'm going to say a second time, which Quran are you going to write in there? Look what the answer he gave to him. After 25 minutes, he finally says, they are all the Quran. Every one of these is the Quran. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. You put in some hafs, you put in some warsh, you put in some al-duri, and you just mix them around. You get all 93,000 differences, and that's the Quran. And I just started clapping. And I said, exactly. Proving that it is not from God, it is not from Muhammad, it is from Warish, it is from Ibn Amir, it is from Kalum, it is from all of these names. That means everybody, there has not just been 30, because these 30 were chosen from 700. 700 different Qurans. Can you then understand why in 1924, in the high schools there in Cairo, they had a dilemma? Because if you have 30 different answers on standardized testing for high school students, what are you going to do when you have 30 different answers for the same question? They needed one answer. They needed one Quran that they could go back to. That's why they had to go to Muhammad ibn al-Husayni al-Haddad, and they went to Al-Azhar University and said, you of all people, can you please choose one of them so we can have standardized tests? That's the whole reason the Quran was canonized for high school students in one city in 1924. Now, have you heard this before?
No. Sounds like Uthman.
Telling the whole world this.
Yeah. Well, they've been hiding it, obviously. And Don Deal, Dr. Smith has already alluded to this and more or less let the cat out of the bag, but maybe you can give our viewers a succinct understanding, drawing together what he's already presented. Let's say I'm a Muslim apologist and I'm hearing this and going back to Dr. Janasik's program on Monday, we're beginning to apply this criticism to the Quran, which has never really been done before. We've been doing that with the Bible for a couple hundred years. And so what about this claim? Well, Jay Smith and Janasik and Don Deal, they're a bunch of hypocrites because basically, all of this liberal higher criticism, I mean, they just reject offhand when it comes to the Bible, but they turn around and use it at any chance they can to try to deconstruct the Quran. So can you help our viewers understand the problem there?
Sure. When we respond to the liberal critics of the Bible, we don't simply say the Bible is true and you're wrong. There may be people that do that, but none of the scholars of the Bible do that. Christian who are scholars will respond with counter evidence and arguments for why the skeptical critics and the Western critics, when they go too far in the criticism of the Bible, are wrong. The same two people can look at the same evidence. You can look at the different manuscripts and see the slight variations. And one scholar is going to say, this proves that there's no original. And another one will say, by determining the locations and dates of when these these manuscripts originated, we can trace back the original wording of that verse or that sentence, and we can discover through the same tools you're using and come to an understanding of the original wording of it. So two different scholars from two different backgrounds will look at the same evidence in different ways. The difference is that when we're simply applying those same tools that the liberal critics and the conservative biblical scholars have used, they both use the same tools. Some of the conclusions are different because, once again, the liberal critics are generally have an anti-supernatural bias into their studies. They cannot accept that miracles happen or that God does things. We're not denying that God does things and that God can act and speak. And when we do criticism of the Quran, we're simply applying the same objective tools that to the Quran that we've used. We don't have a red line in biblical scholarship that we don't cross, because we don't have to have this false idea of certainty or damnation in the Christian faith, whereas the Islamic faith is much more prone to have a sort of false certainty, a kind of face that they have to show in public in order to convince others that they're really certain of what they say. So the tools apply equally in both directions. And when conservative Christian scholars disagree with the liberal scholars, they don't simply fall back onto the Bible says so. They present counter alternative evidence and arguments to show why those critics are wrong in certain cases. That's all we're asking the Muslims to do, is provide the counter evidence for why, when we criticize and find evidence for mistakes or problems or contradictions, we're just asking them, using objective material, not simply your faith, but something we can all look at and examine, level the playing field and let us look at the same way and present your arguments for why what we think we see is wrong. And so far, the only arguments I've seen, even from Ivy League trained Muslim scholars, is to call Jay and Dr. Brubaker and others names. Well, from debate class and from logic, that if you have an argument, you present it. If you have evidence, you present it. If you don't, you call names. And so that's what's happening. We're just simply asking for the Muslim scholars to have the same level of interaction with the criticisms and with the evidence that we do for the Bible.
Excellent. Well, I don't know if you've heard, Brother Don, but what is it? Tiliab and our other Muslim congresswoman, the Somali, are calling here just today or yesterday, making a big deal about asking social media, YouTube, and others to eliminate, to censor any negative speech against Islam. Now, of course, Muslims have been calling for that quite a bit over the years. But now the fact that YouTube has chosen to really up the ante with censorship, for example, saying we're going to absolutely censor anything that says that there was fraud in the 2020 election. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty heavy-handed. So with a move like that, the cat's out of the bag. Pandora's box is open. Dr. Smith has been one of the main ones to open it, and we thank God for him. Do you all see an increase in suppression of this? Of course, how can they do it? The internet, but the social media, of course, is so powerful. Do you think that this is going to really come around to them actually actively, aggressively censoring our content? I know Dr. Smith, he's probably on YouTube a million different places. What do you guys see with this? I mean, what can the Muslims do? Obviously, they don't have an answer.
Well, I was going to say, I think there's two steps that I've seen recently, which is number one, cause trouble either through rioting or threats, such that the people who are trying to prevent violence don't censor them for saying that. They censor the source of the antagonism. They say the Christian speech is bringing out violence, and therefore it needs to be censored. They're saying that what we're doing by speaking the truth is the equivalent of shouting fire in a crowded movie theater, that we're causing the problem by our speech. That's the technique by which they're attempting to censor our viewpoint. And there's actually a case for Ratio Christi, the campus apologetics ministry, is going to the Supreme Court, where a university was trying to censor them because they were inciting violence by preaching the gospel.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. Well, Dr. J, I know that there's much more. We only have about 20 minutes left. What would you like our people to get that you haven't already shared about this very hot topic?
Well, listen, we're just scratching it, and there's not enough time in 20 minutes to unpack everything we know. I'm not going to do that. But just bounce off on what you both are saying. Let's be careful we don't get too depressed because of all this, what you're saying. Listen, right now we are not censored. So why in the world don't we use the freedoms we do have to make sure this gets out and get it out full force? I'm getting on as many channels. I'm getting on as many platforms. So far, I have not been censored, but I'll tell you why I'm not censored. I don't get censored like David Wood gets censored or Hatun Tash gets censored, because I don't mock. That's the first thing. And that's what we must be careful. Do not do mocking. Do not sit there. And for heaven's sakes, do not use material that is going to be, that would border hate speech. Don't get into that type of paradigm. Secondly, this kind of material, if it is historical criticism, if for perchance we do get censored, if we do get taken to court, let's do the same thing that Geert Wilders did when he was taken to court with his movie Fitna. He was taken to court there in Holland because he showed 5 verses from the Qur'an and showed the violence that was supported by all these 5 verses. What did he do in court? He just brought these 5 verses back into the court, and he brought experts to exegete these verses. Within 1 week, it was not he that was on trial, it was the Qur'an on trial. So make sure that we use this material even when we're being censored. Let's go back and just say, what is it they're censoring? Let's just show you again what we did before, and you get a second platform. But more than that, you'll get a much broader platform. This will bring down Islam. Islam is absolutely dependent on censorship. There is only one religion in the world that has phobe next to it. We don't have anything phobic in Christianity, and that's why, because we don't have any red lines. You can ask anything you want. The fact that these people here in the United States are demanding that nobody should be able to criticize the book and the man, that's the Quran and Muhammad, suggests to me that both the Quran and Muhammad cannot be protected, cannot be defended. If they need that kind of defense, that you have to censor us from even critiquing it. Thank God you can say anything you want about the Bible. In fact, we encourage people to criticize the Bible. And you can say anything about Jesus Christ. Criticize him left, right, and center. He's been criticized for 2,000 years. Jesus takes the criticism. The Bible has already passed every test. That's the reason why we don't even need a word like phobic. We allow everybody we don't even introduce any red lines. Now, because of that, let's stop talking and bemoaning the fact that this is all getting bad. Let's just keep on hammering away and hammering away and hammering away. And that's the thing that we need to do. And I hope your people are listening. Please don't sit there and wring your hands. It's not that bad. And let's make sure it doesn't get any worse. Let's make sure that we get the material out there. Let's make sure that we get certainly get this information into the public sphere. And then remember that we as Christians are the only ones that really should be doing this, because we're the only ones that can have the antidote. We're the only ones that have the alternative.
Amen.
We are the only ones that have the answer. So why in the world aren't we therefore at the forefront of this debate? Why aren't we taking this into every platform? Why aren't we bringing this up to every Muslim we come across? And all you need to do is ask one simple question. Ask the same question Muhammad Ijab asked of Yasir Qadhi. All right? You now know that there are 30 different Qurans. Every one of them is different. Which one was in heaven? Which is the one that was sent to Muhammad? Which is the one that Uthman wrote? Which one of these? I only have 9 here. And if you don't know the answer, then don't ever tell me again that there is only one Quran. Just stop it. Don't ever say that this Quran is eternal. Just stop it. You're wasting your time. I'm not going to believe you. You haven't convinced me. And I've been waiting now, 30 years for this answer, but actually I've been waiting 6 months since the whole thing went public about it. Yeah, but what you can just see how easy this has become suddenly. Do you see how easy this has become? But see, that's only the first. That's only the first problem with Islam. There's an even larger problem with Muhammad. We haven't even got into that one tonight. Look and see what's happened to Muhammad in 2020. That's a whole nother show. Look and see what we found with the rock inscription. 30,000 rock inscriptions we've now looked at. Look at all the coins that we have looked at from 630, 640, 650 up until 660 when Muawiyah comes to power. Look at his coins. Look at all the coins of Muawiyah, and you will notice that there are images on those coins, his images on the coin, and all the coins that he mints up in Syria in the West have crosses on them, which means he's a Christian. Muawiyah, the Umayyad Caliph, a Christian? How can you have Muawiyah a Christian? I thought he was a Muslim. And this is 30 years that he comes to power after Muhammad is dead.
Yeah.
And you need to look at the coins. You need to look at the inscriptions. You need to look at the Arabic that's in the Quran. And you need to look at the Qiblas of Dan Gibson's. You need to see what was happening. And almost everything that is happening in the north. Nothing is happening in Mecca and Medina at all. Proof that Islam is built on nothing more than sand. Talk about the Quran. All these Qurans only begin to appear in the 8th century. Why are there no Qurans in the 7th century? And the ones that do appear, did you notice when I kept on giving that list? All down that list. Kufa, Damascus, Basra. Only 2 of them come from Mecca and Medina of the original 7. Of the 30 that we've talked about, only 8 of them come from Mecca and Medina. Yet that is where the Qurayshi dialect was created. That is where Uthman had the Zayd ibn Thabit write the Qurayshi dialect, and then he took all the other Qurans that disagreed. These are dialectical differences, is what you said, Joseph. Let's go with that. If they're dialectical differences, how can you burn them if they're just oral? How do you burn oral dialects?
You can.
Bingo. You have to burn manuscripts, right?
Yeah.
You have to burn books. How can you have dialectical differences in Arabic without the Dhamma, the Kasr, and the Fatah?
Yeah.
Bingo. You can understand what I'm saying, can't you, Joseph? Don, I don't expect you to understand this, but Joseph, can you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
That right there shows that there's a real problem that Muslim scholars haven't yet answered. Now take that on board and see what you're going to run with that. So obviously, if this is correct, there was a man named Uthman. Listen, we can't find any reference to anybody called Abu Bakr, anybody called Umar, anybody called Uthman, or anybody called Ali from the 7th century who is a caliph. Not one reference, not one inscription refers to them.
Now, Dr. Smith, real quickly, I'm not bringing this up because I believe it, but because you and I actually did a program, maybe, 2-3 years ago. You remember when this manuscript suddenly shows up in London? And
Birmingham Folio.
Yeah. Oh, this is from the time of Muhammad. This is from just decades from the time, maybe 20 years from the time of Muhammad. So if I'm a Muslim listening to our programs, we say, well, what about that? Doesn't that prove something? Do we have any information further on that? Or
Okay, let's go through that real quickly.
Yeah.
Joseph, what do you know about the Birmingham folio? How big is it?
Not much. I remember this, though. I remember there's no diacritical, or there were diacritical marks. And I asked you, if there wasn't diacritical marks in Arabic at that time, why does it have it on there? I remember that.
There are no diacritical marks. It is just Razam. All right. How big is it? It's about 33 verses, just 2 folios, front and back of 2 pages, right?
Okay.
And what surahs do they include? 18, 19, and 20. Are there 30 verses in 18, 19, and 20?
No,
This is just a fraction of even 18, 19, and 20. And what are the stories in those on those 2 folios? The story of the 7 sleepers, is that Quranic? I mean, yes, it is. But is that Islamic?
No, it comes before.
That is from the 2nd century and the 3rd century. The story of Jacob the Lesser, is that Islamic? No, that's from the 4th century. The story of Moses, is that Islamic? No, that comes from the Bible itself. That comes from 3400 BC. Even the stories that are in those folios is nothing to do with Muhammad, nothing to do with Islam. It's all pre-Islamic. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, the information, yeah.
All right, now just stop. So they did carbon dating on it, and the date that they got was 568 to 645. 568 is 2 years before Muhammad was born, right?
Yeah. Right.
645 is 7 years before the Quran was canonized by Uthman in 652. Do you see a problem there?
Yeah, right. It would be too early.
Too early. And if you take the median date, which is the most accurate date, that would make it 610. But did the Quran even exist in 610?
No, that's the first of Revelation.
Did these 3 chapters exist in 610?
No.
No, but they did possibly exist, because when you're talking about carbon dating, you're only talking about the parchment. You're talking about the material it's written on, and you're talking about the animal, because remember, these are vellum and this is parchment. These are animal skins. You're talking about when the animal died. That's what carbon dates. It does not date the ink. So I will run with that, and I say, yes, the carbon dating is that. If you want to talk about accuracy, let's do carbon dating. Let's look at the Sana manuscript. The Sana manuscript has also been carbon dated. The Sana manuscript is an even older manuscript, and it was carbon dated not just in the London laboratory. It was also carbon dated in Kiel in Germany. It was also carbon dated in Zurich in Switzerland, and it was also carbon dated in France. 4 different countries, all in Europe, all carbon dated, and look at the dates they got from that. When they did the carbon dating on the Sana manuscript, those dates went from 400 AD up until 550. That means all the dates for the Sana manuscript predate Muhammad, predate Islam, predate the Quran, predate everything we know about Islam. If you want to go with carbon dating, then you're going to have to say the Sana manuscript actually existed either 50 to 200 years before Islam. Do you want to run with that? Do you want to go with that? Be careful about carbon dating. Number 2.
This is not the Quran. The obvious thing is that this is not the Quran. These are Arabic writings, verses of stories that came apocryphal or after the Gospels.
What do you think the Quran is made of? It is made up of story after story after story. These are apocryphal writings. The story of Jacob of Edessa is there in chapter 18. The story of Dual Qarnayn is also there in chapter 18. We have stories in chapter 19. It's full of stories of Jesus and Mary, and these are coming from these are Gnostic writings. These are stories about his infancy. Isn't that interesting? The infancy gospel of Thomas, written in the 2nd century. So these are all stories that have been borrowed right, left, and center. And look and see where they were borrowed. They were not borrowed down in the south, because there were no Jews living in Mecca and Medina. That's another big misnomer. History has proven that there were no Jews that early, that far south. But they were all written, if you look and see where these stories existed, way up in Iraq. That's your background. That's why I said we come to Iraq later in the show. Now I'm showing you. These all come from Hira, which is today called Kufa, which is just southwest of Baghdad, which used to be Ctesiphon. Yeah. That's where these were. What is in Kufa? What was in Hira? That's where the seminaries were for the Jews and the Christians. And these Arabs who were there having these discussions with the Jews and Christians, no wonder they were borrowing these material, because they were borrowing these apocryphal writings, and they were borrowing these sectarian writings. That's why these writings that all existed in Iraq are the ones that made it into the Quran. But these writings couldn't have been there in the Quran if they were down in the South. That's what Dr. John Wansborough said back in 1970, in the 1970s, with his 2 books called Quranic Studies and Sectarian Milieu. So we've known about this for over 50 years. Why haven't Muslims listened to Dr. John Wansborough, who was head of department at School of Oriental and African Studies in London when he came out with his books? He just destroyed any notion that any of these stories, which the Quran is riddled with, could have been in existence in the 7th century, to say nothing of the fact that the Arabic they used did not come from that part of the world. Like I said earlier, they all come from the far north.
Are you telling me that Muhammad did not?
Everything you know about the Quran is from the north, not from the south.
Are you telling me that Muhammad did not slaughter the men of Banu Qurayza, and I can no longer use that apologetic?
Here we go. I had a debate with David Wood just on this about 3 weeks ago in California. You want to get into that one?
But no, on another show, I'd love to. We've got 5 minutes left, and I want to ask Don Deal, who is working on this subject of Islamic law and Sharia. Don, all of this, what's the bearing on your studies, and then, of course, the implications of the Muslim world and practice, being affected by Islamic law and Sharia? Or do you see any in your research? Have you seen any of this? Have you seen any echoes of this, or do you see any implications?
What I see is more scholars dividing Sharia and Islamic law. Traditionally, up until the 19th century, it was considered that Sharia and Islamic law are coextensive or synonyms for each other. With these things that we're learning now about the Quran and the development and the historical development of the religion, what you're finding is more Muslims who want to hang on to something of the Quran are starting to divide Islamic law from Sharia. Sharia being God's eternal law and plan, which is of which we can learn in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet, and then Islamic law being human attempts to interpret and apply those findings to situations that arrive in life. What you find is that there's no list of laws under Sharia. There's no single book that will tell you what is in Sharia, because the same problems showing up with the Hadith, which primarily make up the Sunnah of the Prophet, is finding out which ones really happened, which ones did he really say. How much certainty can you have that Sharia existed as a fully orbed system early on? And the answer is there is no evidence of that. There's different ideas that show up and different individual precepts contained in the Quran and such, but there's never been a list of here is Sharia. And if you go to the 4 current schools of Islamic law, the Hanafi, Hanbali, Shafi, and Maliki schools, they have different interpretations of, that's why they're different schools. That's why you know that Islamic law is not the same as Sharia, because there can only be one Sharia, but there has been up to 6 to 7 schools of Islamic law. Currently under Sunni Islam, there's 4, and they have different ways of interpreting the data and applying the data. So the doubtfulness of some of the Hadith and some of the understandings of the Quran has filtered into an understanding, which is an attempt to protect the Sharia by bringing doubt to the Islamic law side, where you can change Islamic law. It's the Sharia is eternal, perfect, and uncorruptible, whereas Islamic law is man-made. It's corruptible. It's able to be changed and amended over time. And so you're seeing more scholars in the Middle East. In the West, it's been this way for a while, but more scholars in the Middle East shifting to the view that Islamic law can be changed and amended.
Okay, kind of sounds like our own judges in America today with the Constitution. Dr. J. Smith, before we leave, I've been blessed by hearing your teaching this evening, as well as Brother Don. But let me just ask you before we leave here in just 2 minutes. We have some Christian lay people that just come to church. They don't know a great deal about this. They're having trouble following the argument. From all that you've said, what would be the takeaway for our average Christian who actually wants to minister to a Muslim? Can he be encouraged, or is there anything here that he could use, or how would you encourage them in praying and sharing Christ with Muslims through these findings.
Yeah, listen, before I answer that question, let me just say one thing there. I do want to say that almost all this material, there's an awful lot of new. We haven't even answered yet how they chose this. I was hoping we'd get to that. We haven't had time to do that because I still want you to find out how they chose these 30. You're not going to be, you're going to be gobsmacked when you find out.
Let's do another show. Let's do another show
on that. But if anybody wants to know this material, we are teaching it now in California. We have a master's degree on all of this material. We have 5 teachers, 5 professors. Dr. Janel Janazik is one of them that you had on, I think, on Monday. And if you are interested, you can either go for a master's degree. It is completely accredited now. It is a 36-unit course. You can take it for audit, or you can take it for personal improvement. For a lot of your people who don't want to get a master's degree, they just want to take this material for personal improvement. All of it is done by Zoom webinar, doing what we're doing right now. It comes right to your house. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your own office or your own library. And so we will come to you, and then, of course, it will all be done by those of us, the professors, who will be teaching you week by week by week by week by week. If you want to find out about it, you need to write info, I-N-F-O, at ves.edu. That's info at ves.edu. Now, as far as the takeaway, Joseph, I think the biggest thing here is for an awful lot of people, I don't expect them to learn everything that we've said tonight. There's too much material. Much of it probably went all over the head. What I would say to people who are the lay people who are watching this program, when you meet a Muslim now, any time that they say that the Bible has been corrupted, that the Bible does not have any of its originals, and that the Bible has been accreted, deleted, you name it, just turn right to them and say, oh, and what about your Qurans? What about your 30 official Qurans that exist today? What about the 93,000 differences that you have between these 30 Qurans? What about the fact that not one of these comes from the century that Muhammad came? And you have your originals? Can you show me where the original one is? Can you show me where is this ubiquitous Quran that Uthman suddenly created in 652 and sent to 5 cities? Where is it? Just one. Show me one manuscript. There's 114 surahs that is exactly like this book, this Quran that I have in my hand today. This one here, the Hafs. Word for word, letter for letter, the same. Bingo. Look how easy that is. See how easy we made it? I never had this kind of argument. I had never had this kind of defense, even 2 years ago. Oh, even 6 months ago. In the last 6 months, we have made it easier for everybody. Because now you don't even have to prove it. You can just ask the questions. Remember, the best defense is a good offense. For the first time now, Islam has always said that we cannot argue for our scriptures because we are arguing from silence. That has always been the biggest argument. You have no originals, you have no manuscripts. The earliest manuscripts are the Sinaiticus from the 4th century. You're just arguing from silence. Now, for the first time, we're saying you're arguing from silence.
Gotcha.
In fact, your silence is so definitely it's breaking all the sound barriers and is causing people like Yasser Qadi to have meltdowns like he did in November 26. If the best in the world cannot even answer a blogger in front of 400,000 people what to write on that book, what to write on that empty page, that proves to me that your Quran is written by man. It is riddled with change. It has been changed and changed and changed, accreted and deleted, and finally was canonized in 1924, 96 years ago, and finally made official in 1985, which makes me older than your Quran. Now, can you see how easy it is to say that? And that's why I say for anybody who's listening, you don't even have to know Arabic to make this argument. You don't even have to look and open any of these to see the differences. We've made it as easy as possible. And it's not we that have made it. It's Yasser Qadi that's made it. It's these Islamic scholars that have made it because they have all been basically all their arguments are based on a lie. A lie that we don't have to make for the Bible. Which means now that every Muslim knows that the Quran is nothing more than man-made book full of errors, then why don't you come on home? Come on home to the Bible. The real book, the only book, which has passed every one of these tests, and it is full of truth and the relevancy of Jesus Christ in the New Testament. He is as relevant today as any day. He is as relevant today as he was the day he came to earth, and the 33 years he lived on earth. That's why come on home to Jesus Christ. Come on home to the Bible. Come on home to the gospel. That is good news.
Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. The Bible has been referred to as an anvil that has wore out many a hammer. The Quran, on the other hand, is something quite different, is it not?
It's sinking sand.
Brother Don, Brother Dr. J. Smith, thank you so much. Thank you, dear viewers, for watching. And we hope, as Dr. J. Smith has much more to say, and I want to hear more, the truth is the truth, but I am a little disappointed that all these hadith stories that I used to use apologetically, now that might be taken out from under me. They aren't even the truth.
Destroy that the next time.
We'll do that next time. Until then, good night and God bless.